Locked On Avalanche, another central air conditioning crossover, this time with Mr. Jack Bushman of the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. And that guy they got over there, number 98 or something like that, he might get mentioned once or twice. Let's talk about it. New episode of Locked On Avalanche coming at you.
Your Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Locked On Avalanche and Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Thank you for tuning in and making it your first listen of the day. That's always appreciated. From Locked On Avalanche, I'm Chris Micieli, and with me as always, my co-host, Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. And from Locked On Blackhawks, Jack Bushman is joining the conversation today. Was that like a... What was it? The Partridge, not Partridge Family. The
Brady Bunch.
Brady Bunch. Yeah, we're all waiting. So far, Jack, we were talking before we recorded and just tried to remember the last time we did a crossover, and we kind of put it all together. And the last time we did was after you won the lottery, clearly knowing who you were going to take, but had not drafted him yet. You get through a full season with him. There's going to be a lot of talk about him and the Blackhawks for the next 20 plus years. But let's focus in on the 1 year that he did have. Why don't we start right there? We're going to get to a lot today on this episode. But it's funny. I got someone from our subtext who said, do you think you guys can get through the entire show without saying his name? He didn't even want to say it in the question on subtext. And it's like impossible. It's like if you have a bowl of, chocolate peanut butter cup ice cream in front of you, you're not going to eat it. No, like you got to say the name. So Connor Bedard, year one, give us a summary of it.
Yeah, he basically was the Chicago Blackhawks. So if we're talking about that team, I mean, we got to start there, right? It's only fitting. And what I will say first is it's always fun to be joined by you guys during a summer conversation. It was fun kind of weaving through the memories there before air and talking about the funny takes that we've had. And I'm sure we'll have more here on today's episode. Oh, yeah. But yeah, you could have basically called them the Chicago Connor Bedards last year. That was the name of the game for them, was what was this kid going to look like in the NHL, right? There was all that hype, and then the performance at the World Juniors. He hits the heartbreaker celly, and Blackhawks fans are like, all right, we need this guy. We get him, but now we got to figure out how is he going to transfer that skill over to the NHL. And, there were some questions about how he was going to handle playing against grown men at his size. And I think, he was a little bit over his head in those first couple of weeks in the season. It was a pretty clear adjustment period, and it felt like he was out of the gate a little bit one-dimensional. And I always expected the goal-scoring ability to translate over. I mean, not many people, even though he's 17, 18 years old, already have a better shot than Connor Bedard. I expected that to translate. It felt like that was really the only area that he was comfortable in those first couple of weeks. And then we just started to see him blossom. And it really felt like, interestingly enough, when he scored the Michigan goal against the St. Louis Blues, it was like, all right, this guy's starting to feel himself out here, right? And unfortunately, it felt like he was really hitting that stride, and then he suffered that jaw injury against the New Jersey Devils, which I will say I stand by. I think it was a clean hit, and I think it's a wake-up moment that Connor Bedard has to realize, like, as a primary puck carrier at his size, you got to be aware at all times. So you never want a kid like that to suffer an injury, but I think it'll actually be something that kind of maybe enlightens him about how to go about his business out there on the ice. But you could just tell the growing comfortability, the confidence, and how his skill set diversified throughout the course of the year. His playmaking was so much more crisp and so much better as the year progressed. And I think that's also just a symptom of establishing chemistry with guys, right? Like, he's thrown in on the top line from game one, and they're like, hey kid, go lead our offense here. So it's a big ask, but he got himself comfortable, got himself situated. And, maybe The numbers weren't the most impressive, being under a point per game and only 22 goals. However, considering what he was playing with out there, man, I mean, he was the best player on the team, bar none. And it couldn't have been more apparent in those couple of weeks that he was out, where the Blackhawks were literally struggling to score more than one goal in a game. So it was still a spectacular year, even though the numbers maybe didn't pop like some people had hoped. In all areas, he got better. And that's what we wanted to see from him in his rookie year. And also, you got to give him credit for handling that media slew, right? Like, and it was never stopping for him, especially during, obviously the lead up going into the season after being the number one overall pick. Those first 5 games of the year for the Blackhawks, which, by the way, we'll get there. Bless the hockey gods for not having us open up the year in Ball Arena so our goalie can play slap shot regatta on opening night again. But we had the Avs, the Bruins, the Leafs, like right out of the gate, the biggest media markets, right? And they're throwing questions at him left and right. He has to be in front of the cameras every day. And he was the youngest player in the NHL and stayed so composed. So as well as he did on the ice, guys, I was just as impressed with him off the ice. He's a super good kid, says all the right things, took the weight on it as well as anyone at that age possibly could. So just impressive in multiple different areas out of Connor Bedard, and got to be encouraged about where this kid's going, considering, again, he's still only a young 18-year-old right here, right now.
Yeah, and you knew the moment was going to be big when you saw like the number one picks, Wemby in the NBA and Bedard. They were taking picks. You knew this was going to be big. And then we saw that with the Avs and Blackhawks broadcasts. How many times they said Bedard in the broadcast? It was like it was a running joke that we had all year. But what do you do in year 2? Now that Bedard survived year 1 with all the flash bulbs and the media scrum, now year 2, you survived. What is something Bedard needs to do to thrive and really grow as a part of this Chicago Blackhawks squad?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think, quite honestly, in order for him to take that next step, what was very apparent is he needed more help, because I love Nick Foligno, and he has been a great veteran leader since he's come on here, right? And has done some like recruiting to get guys like Tyler Bertuzzi, who signed on here, and TJ Brody, and those guys who he's familiar with. He's just not a top line winger at this age and at this stage of his career. And in order to have Connor Bedard flourish and take that next step, right, he's got to get some more talent next to him. And you got to make his line more capable and give the power play as a whole more avenues where you just don't run this thing through him. And I think in terms of just the development, it's really just keeping on where he left off last year, right? Like, I think we do want to see a little bit of a leap, considering the help that they brought in. And now that they do have some more top 6 pieces, a much deeper forward group, even a better defensive unit, so they don't have to be, focused on that side of things all the time, right? I think it's just going to let Connor Bedard be in that natural spot a little bit more this year. He's still going to be the head honcho, and he's going to be that as long as he's here for the Blackhawks, but it doesn't feel like it's a one-trick pony show for this team up front. And I think that's actually going to be a huge help in him taking that next leap, because if they rolled out the same team this year, you want the numbers to go up, but how would you expect them to go that far up, considering they're just rolling it back? And then maybe some people get frustrated. You don't see the development. I think the best thing that Kyle Davidson did this offseason was get him some legitimate help up there. And I really feel like having those tools now alongside him is going to allow for him to succeed this sophomore year of his.
What do you think of, what was the plan all along last year? We're just throwing him on the top line and he's living there. We're not going to move him around. If he's struggling a little bit, maybe we'll drop him down. No, we're just going to put him on the top line, let him take his lumps. We know we're not fighting for a playoff spot or anything bigger than that. And let's just let him get as much experience against the other team's best players as possible. And you got through relatively unscathed. He did have that one injury. But now you can say, like, hey, he got through it. And now looking forward to this year, you can look back on it now and be like, okay, I think it was a smart move that we did that. Or I mean, what was the plan originally? And obviously you're benefiting from it, you would think, going into year 2, right?
Yeah. So I think the plan was always to put him as the top line center right out of the gate. I mean, day one of training camp, that was kind of the idea. And they went and acquired Taylor Hall from the Boston Bruins to kind of get him that piece along with him, and a guy who also had been a former number one overall pick to kind of show him the ropes and how to go through all of those things. Unfortunately, that plan got thrown into the toilet 10 games into the season as Taylor Hall tore his ACL. So Bedard was always penciled in that role. But I'll tell you what, guys, it was always going to be his job. But if you go and look at the ice time numbers from early on to later on in the year, he was averaging well over 20 minutes a game. And that's because he was the best player out there. He was the best center option, best offensive option for the Blackhawks. And it wasn't like that path was going to be handed to him. Yes, because he is the future and you want to let him develop as much as he possibly can. And, you know, he's here in the NHL. He's not going to be playing in any other league. You might as well get the most out of it, but he still went out there and absolutely earned it. And one thing that's also very apparent about Connor too is he's a hard worker, man. This kid lives, eats, and breathes hockey, and he wants to be out there on the ice all the time. There were multiple stories of like Foligno and veteran guys in camp being like, we got to get this guy off the ice. Like, he doesn't understand. You can't do this every day in an 80 game season and expect your body to kind of hold up. And then there were even stories of him, you know, like sneaking on the rink with the bucket on when he wasn't fully cleared yet. Like the guy just absolutely loves the game. He's got an incredible work ethic. So that's what I love about Connor too. Like, I'm sure he's aware that he has this skill set, but he's not going to let that deviate him from his path whatsoever. And again, that just goes to the impressiveness that he has off the ice and off the ice, guys.
Yeah. I think he was going to get some adversity somewhere. And just the weight on his shoulders was massive. And then you get, like you said, on the ice, Taylor Hall gets injured. I forgot it was that early in the season, to be honest with
you. He played like, sorry to interrupt. He played like 4 games with it too.
With
it was out the gate.
Crazy.
It stunk.
Yeah, I forgot how that was that early in the season. So on the ice, he's already, facing some adversity. And then you have the Corey Perry stuff off the ice. So, and we lose track of the site. He's an 18-year-old kid. And things like that are getting thrown around. So, man, like, you can't prepare for all of that stuff. You can prepare for what you're expecting in terms of like, I know the media is going to be all over me every single game at my locker, 1,000 questions after every single game. And you can handle that because you can prepare for that. You can't prepare for, the line mate they brought in specifically you to get hurt, the Corey Perry nonsense. And then he still came out and performed well all through. You got to give him credit for that stuff.
Absolutely. And I think, people, I appreciate the game that Brock Faber brought to the table this year, man. But if you consider what Connor Bedard truly did with all those circumstances you just outlined, man, there was not a more impressive rookie in the league. And I'm not trying to make a controversial statement, but I think that just outlines the debate there, in my opinion.
Here's the funny thing. When this episode airs, it'll be on Friday. The Wednesday episode, we did the crossover with Seth, and we asked him the same exact question.
I love it.
And honestly, to be totally transparent, if I had a vote, it probably would have went to Faber. And it's not a knock on Bedard at all. It's just, I don't want to get into it now. Go listen to the Locked On Wild crossover if you want to get into it. But
great plug.
There you go. But that calls for you and Seth to have a crossover and just duke it out for 3 segments. So
I have no problem getting in Seth's grill, dude. We'll have a feisty one. We'll duke it out.
Are Shaggy and I going to Dana White this thing?
You might Hunter Campbell and Dana White up in here.
Yeah. At the Sphere?
We'll do it. I'll call it. At the Sphere.
Yeah.
We got it. I'll call it.
Not at the Sphere. At Sphere.
Yeah, I hate that. I promise I'll kill the press conference.
All right, let's get into what happened at Sphere and the Blackhawks draft and everything that's gone on in the offseason so far with them. So we'll do that right after this. All right, let's hear from Game Time. It's an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in pricing, views from your seats, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. What do we love about the Game Time app? Well, you get priority last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off when you're buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. They have the flash deals, zone deals, all in pricing, no surprise fees at checkout. Your seat view, the lowest price guarantee, you'll get 110% of the difference if you find a price lower somewhere else. So you can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. So create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. That's Game Time. Download it today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, so Blackhawks pretty active off season so far. You had a really good draft again, and that's what you need to do when. I would assume you had a good. I thought you had a good draft. I think you would agree with that. And then so we'll start there, and then we'll get into some of their signings. You kind of heard that, well, not that you kind of heard it. You did hear like the draft started at pick 2, right? We all knew this was like, Bedard version 2.0. We knew Sullivan was going to go number 1, and it was going to be who's starting at number 2. Pronounce his name, please. Cause I these new guys, I got to say it 100 times before I can get it under
You're good. Artem Levshinov.
Was it always him? Because I know there was a couple guys that could be at 2, and he was definitely one of them. What was, I don't want to say it was a surprise, but is that who you thought they were going to take?
So it was pretty consensus 2-horse race for the Blackhawks at number 2 in that position between Artem Levshinov and Ivan Demidov. We started to get closer to the NHL draft. There were more and more whispers that it was going to be Levshinov. Multiple reports saying the Blackhawks had their minds made up on him the day before the draft. I will say I was holding out hope that they were going to go with Ivan Demidov, but it's not because of Artem Levshinov, the player. In my draft previews, I said he deserves to be the first defenseman off of the board because he's a big right-handed shot. Those are, what NHL teams dream of. They don't grow on trees, and was nearly a point per game defenseman as a freshman in college hockey, led Michigan State to the Big Ten championship game, and did all that with only a year and a half of experience over in North America. So he really burst onto the scene in a big way, and the Blackhawks had a need for right-handed defensemen in their organization. So it certainly fits the bill there. And I think Artem Levshinov is going to be a really good player. The interesting kind of debate here at number 2, guys, was the potential of the Blackhawks getting a player that can play alongside Connor Bedard at a high rate for a long, long time. And I actually just went through this topic a little bit on an episode that I posted today, going through who could be Connor Bedard's future line mates when the Blackhawks get back to being contenders. And based on what they have in their organization, in the prospect pool, and even after the free agent ads that they made, which I know we'll get into here in just a second, I still struggle to see kind of that top guy who projects to be right next to Connor Bedard. And
I'm with you.
Ivan Demidov would have checked that bucket, fellas. So that's why I was really thinking the Blackhawks, especially considering they have a deep prospect pool, all the picks that Davidson has accumulated since he's taken over, it felt like they were in a position to shoot upside. So that's where my disappointment was a little bit with them going with Artem Levshinov. But again, it's not because of Levshinov. It's more so because of what they passed up in order to get him. But he certainly was, outside of Macklin Celebrini, considered to be one of the only, if not the only other guy who could potentially be ready for pro action this upcoming season. So he certainly deserved to be in that conversation. And again, I'm not disappointed in the player the Blackhawks get.
Right.
You just can't help but think about, Connor Bedard and Ivan Demidov, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin from 2 decades ago, right? Like there were so many potential comps there, and it's going to be a fun one to look back at in years to come.
And I understand, and we're going to get into the free agents in just a minute, but with everything in the draft and the free agency, this is one of my number one subject I love to tackle when it comes to these crossovers. And with Chicago, it's glaring. And with everything you have in Bedard and what he could bring to this team and the future of the league, honestly, why has Chicago not addressed the goalie position? How confident do you feel in that goalie position? Because eventually you're going to have a solid goalie, not just a goalie, but a tandem to where Connor Bedard going out here and scoring 2 to 3 goals a night is going to pay off in wins where he's not heavily reliant on those kind of performances and you burn him out.
Yeah, definitely a fair point. And the Blackhawks are in a little bit of a weird filler in terms of their goaltending position, because last year in the 2023 draft, they took Adam Guyan, who was the first goaltender off of the board, but we know how long goalies take, fellas. He's not going to be here probably till 2030.
Yeah.
But they do have Drew Commesso, who they drafted in the second round back in 2019, who just stepped onto the pro scene last year. But kind of based on how Kyle Davidson's handled his prospects so far, there's going to be no rush for a guy like Drew Commesso. I'd expect he steps onto the NHL scene in the 2025-2026 season. And there are hopes. I firmly believe that he's going to be the next guy in net for the Blackhawks. But yeah, it puts them in a really tough position until those kind of guys are ready to step on the scene. And I need to give a lot of credit to Peter Mrazek. I mean, last year, believe it or not, could have been much uglier. Like, Peter Mrazek balled out, and considering he was coming off of some groin injuries that lingered his couple of years prior, there were even questions of whether he could still be an NHL goaltender. Like, he answered the bell in a big way, and Kyle Davidson rewarded him with that 2-year contract extension, which isn't going to hurt the Blackhawks in the short term financially. But the real big winner, not to kind of bury the lead here, boys, my biggest win out of all the signings, my favorite signing, I should say, out of the 8 that the Blackhawks made on free agency was Laurent Brossoit, man, because Arvid Soderblom last year he just wasn't ready for that scene. And it was really clear anytime they threw him out there, the Blackhawks really just didn't stand a chance. And it's kind of just become a theme around this team right now. It's time to go in the right direction. They've been testing the fan base's patience. And I know you can't rush a full-scale rebuild, but it's time to go in that direction. And not only was it important for them to address areas up front and on defense, they needed to address the backup goaltending situation. And when diving through options for the Blackhawks, I really thought Brossoit was not going to be someone who was kind of fitting what they were looking for. I thought they were just going to go after a veteran ad, a guy who's going to be serviceable, maybe start somewhere around 30 games to take the weight off of Mrazek's shoulder a little bit. And I know Brossoit doesn't really have a great sample size. He's never played more than 24 games in his NHL career, but in a single season, I should say. But back-to-back years with a 927 save percentage. Yes, in a backup role, but at $3.3 million for 2 years. And again, this is a Blackhawks team that they got money to burn. That was, I thought, a huge addition to really shore things up, especially considering I don't know if Peter Mrazek's going to be able to run it back like he did last year at his age. You need a more than serviceable backup, and I thought they checked that box big time with Laurent Brossoit, and they're going to have both of those guys on the books until that 2025-2026 campaign when Drew Commesso, hypothetically, I think, is going to arrive on the big league scene.
You mentioned they have money to burn, and that's a great segue into where I wanted to ask you next. When I play my armchair GM role, I'm always going right up to the cap. You know what I mean? Like I feel like why have money in the bank?
I wish owners thought like you, buddy.
Yeah, well, maybe I should think like owners. But so I guess that's where I want to go with this. Like I'm on their Puckpedia page, and they have 6 million, over 6 million, 6.6 and change left in cap.
We're taking donations, by the way.
Yeah.
I saw your guys's too. No, believe me, I saw that red number.
Yes. So when you're in a situation like the Blackhawks are, why not spend that? You know what I mean? Like that could help your team. But that's a good number. I'm not saying you have to all spend it on one guy, but why leave money on the table? Because you're pretty much, I mean, would you say you're done? You said backup goalie, those are small AAV ones, but the big moves are they done? Or am I just thinking like, give them some time and they will soak up some of that money? But if they don't, why not go out and spend it?
So I would say, I think I would guess the reasoning for that is, first off, the way that kind of the roster is structured right now. And this was certainly something that they purposely did to make this team better. There are guys fighting for jobs, like outlining the forward group and the defensive group. Maybe you don't recognize how many bodies they truly have by looking at a Puckpedia, but there are so many guys who stepped onto the pro scene last year in Rockford that are trying to come up and make that leap. And quite honestly, those are the guys this front office really cares about, right? Like those are the guys who could be your future. So that's why even like bringing in a guy like a TJ Brody on a 2-year deal when we have 3 left-handed defensemen that are trying to kick down the doors. That almost felt like it was a little bit much. So I wonder if they're not spending that $6 million because they look around and they say, we have enough bodies here and we do still want to give kids opportunities. But if we have too many bodies, then we kind of push them out and don't give them that hope. So that would kind of be my one guess about it in terms of leaving that money there right now. I just quite honestly don't know where they'd add it to, because I think their roster is pretty set in stone at this point.
It is. That, I mean, like I said, at this point, I don't know what else you do, but I guess it's good to have it there just to have some monopoly money to play around with, see what happens during the course of the season.
Quite honestly, though, this team just doesn't really care about the money right now, right?
Yeah.
For the position they're in, like they're still in this kind of weird filler year where it's just really about, are these guys going to take the next step that we're hoping are puzzle pieces, right? Like we know, we're better. Are we a Stanley Cup playoff contender? We're probably not there, but we're not even really trying to be. We're not trying to rush the rebuild. We're focusing on development. So it's like 6 mil,
all those
10
young
mil.
guys. Yeah, like all those young guys lifting up.
Exactly.
You want them to at the same time, and then kind of have that kind of have a New Jersey Devils type season.
Hey,
where nobody thinks they're going to do well, and then they miraculously do well. I heard that somewhere on a crossover a couple of years ago. I don't remember what.
Sounds familiar.
Probably was a really attractive guy, but there's nothing more dangerous in the NHL than a team that actually has realistic observations and an understanding on where their team is, has money to burn, and is comfortable with a season where you're not asking too much of your team. And you're watching teams that are like Colorado and other teams that are up against the cap and overspending just to try and put a team on ice. And Chicago's just sitting there waiting on everybody to develop at the same time, so they don't have to bring on these veterans that are kind of bogging down things. And we kind of look at Chicago as like a shell of what they used to be. And when everybody thinks Blackhawks, you always think of the glory days in the 2010s. But I think Chicago is shaping up to be something pretty scary in the future.
And what definitely. I will say is kind of sneaky this year that I don't know if enough people have realized. They're a veteran bunch now. They're going to go from one of the youngest teams to one of the oldest in the league based on their additions. Brossoit, who's been around for a handful of years, Martinez and Brody on the back end, Teravainen, Bertuzzi, Foligno still there. They add Pat Maroon. They brought in Ilya Mikheyev. Like, this is not as young of a team as maybe some people expect for a rebuilding squad necessarily, which I think kind of adds into the they're going to be hard to play against factor. I don't know how good they're going to be, but they're going to be hard to play against. They're not going to – I don't think anyone should be taking them lightly.
And I think that's a good thing for a team in their situation to be. Like, you want the fans to be entertained, and you don't want to just root for a team that just gets rolled over. So, yeah, I mean, if you lose the majority of the games, but you make it difficult for that other team and it's watchable, I think that's a step in the right direction. So,
and the young guys are learning that. The young guys are seeing that. They're learning that. It's instilling in them at a young age. So I think that's really important. And another good job by Kyle Davidson to make those kinds of ads.
Definitely. You got something, Kyle?
Yeah, I do have one more Chicago question that perplexes my mind. What is the benefit of playing a preseason game in Milwaukee, Wisconsin?
You know, believe it or not, there are a lot of Blackhawks fans up there because they don't have a team. In Wisconsin hockey, the college is big. Like, it's big, and the game's big up there. So it is like a reachable area that, you know, if we're talking baseball, I'm not trying to hang out with many Milwaukee Brewers fans, but there's more Blackhawks fans up there than you would think. So I actually don't hate that idea.
Okay.
Believe it or not. As random as it probably seems to outsiders, like, what are these guys doing?
Yeah, I get that insight because when you see St. Louis and Chicago and Milwaukee, you're tracking down AHL and ECHL affiliates and how it works. So that does make sense. You're going to where fan bases really aren't, and you're kind of getting that new fan base that just kind of latch onto your team. So I get that.
Which is great. Like, in the league, like, you know, they went to Australia for a preseason game. You could just went to Milwaukee.
Right.
You're going to go overseas.
Just as beautiful.
Yeah, come on. Just don't go to Atlanta for the third time. So, all right. It says crazy talk over there. And I did not tell Jack what that meant or anything. Like, he's not always prepared, but he's not prepared for what I'm about to ask him. Two things that I want to get to, and I guess it doesn't really matter which one I start with, but I'll start with, I'm sure you are well aware of what's going on with the Colorado Avalanche and Val Nichushkin and his struggles right now, and suspended for 6 months and all that stuff. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen with the Avalanche and Nichushkin long term. They're not saying a ton, but what they are saying, it just seems like they don't have plans to move him right now. When the suspension is over, he comes back and we'll see what happens. Who knows what's going on behind closed doors and away from the microphones? We don't know. There was a rumor floating around that got squashed pretty quickly, but hey, it's a rumor, so we're going to build it up and blow it up more than it probably needs to be. That it was entertained by the Chicago Blackhawks to trade for one Val Nichushkin. Do you think they would? Hey, and I'm just going to say that $6.6 million you have available, his contract is 6.1. So you could give him, you could fit into your system wonderfully. You'd still have money left over. I mean, and everybody's happy. No,
Kyle Davidson would get run out of that building, dude.
Really?
There's no way. Considering no, there's no way. Too much drama, too much controversy. That is not what the Chicago Blackhawks need right now. It was I don't know if you guys were familiar with Trevor Connolly in this year's NHL draft. I mean, like watching the film, I'm like, this guy's a top 15 player in this year's draft. And the Blackhawks maybe could get him at 18. You can't touch him if you're the Chicago Blackhawks. You cannot touch him. It just can't happen, man. It can't.
And oddly enough, where he went is exactly where I had him going. I don't think anybody's surprised that Vegas grabbed him at 19.
Surprise.
Yeah, no.
It was them or Nashville.
You think Nashville would have went that route?
Yeah.
You think so? If it wasn't Vegas, I don't know who it would have been.
It would have been interesting.
Yeah. And then with the Nichushkin thing, like, Kyle and I are kind of at odds. Like I feel like they would, like I said, they are going to bring him back and maybe work through this again another time. Kyle's of the mind where I think a lot of Avalanche fans are, where it's like, just the trust is gone. The trust, it's just not there. And if he does come back in November, which you still have a ton of the season left in November, everybody's going to be like, okay, well, once we get to the playoffs, that's where the questions are going to come up again. So, and I get all of that. I mean, you just focus in on the player. He's great. He is fantastic. And what he does for this team can't be understated or overstated. He's a great player. He's found his role, but he's also coming up with some problems. So, I don't know. I just thought maybe the Blackhawks would want a solid, tall, big, great forechecking forward to put right next to Connor Bedard, and Bedard could maybe be the MVP next year thanks to Val Nichushkin. No,
don't you guys have another one of those supposed to hit the free agent market next year?
Oh, don't. I saw you did a show, I think, on that not that long ago. Oh, you did?
It was today. You might have seen another one.
There was one. I think you did like a little. I don't know if it was during the season or not, maybe it wasn't you. Maybe it was the Sabres show. It might have been him.
So it was kind of just the same. The same where I had that discussion earlier as to where is Connor Bedard's line mate. Mm-hmm. Having that question, I really do wonder if the 2025 free agent class is when they address that. And that's kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys about, considering just your feelings on the position of the Avalanche real quick. I know we're running a little long here, but
that's all right. We're good.
Just
it's Friday.
Coming off, and I think I worded this a little poorly during the intro, coming off of a Stanley Cup, those first couple years after, when you still have a team that is capable, a successful season that doesn't end in the Stanley Cup feels unsuccessful. And then there's the Val Nichushkin rumblings, and obviously there's the Mikko Rantanen stuff with his contract supposed to come off the books next year. I'm just wondering kind of what is the state of Avalanche fans, and how do you feel about the position they find themselves in right here, right now at this point in the summer?
Well, first with the Mikko stuff, these aren't the droids you're looking for. Move on. Two, coming off the Stanley Cup, I don't think the Avs have had a full altogether season, and there's always been something that you can attribute, like injuries being the year after the Stanley Cup. Like that team was so devastated with injuries, and then Nichushkin, that wasn't a full team. It didn't feel like a full effort, and you felt like 100% healthy Avalanche team could really make a run. And then you had last year, and then you had assistance program mid-season with Girard and Nichushkin, and then you had Nichushkin leaving the Dallas series. And again, you still don't feel like you had that 2022 Avalanche, like everybody gave everything they had to win that cup, and you still don't feel like you have everybody giving their full effort yet. So you still don't feel like any season is a complete letdown because there's so much left on the table. And I feel like if the Avs can get back to one of those seasons where there's no excuses, you still haven't had Landeskog back since we won the cup.
Which is crazy to think.
I know.
There's so many things that the Avalanche have left on the table, and you can say, well, if we didn't hit this or this team had Ryan Johansson, Tomas Tatar, they had Bowen Byram at trade deadline. They offloaded all of that because things weren't going as planned. So if you got everything going the Avalanche way, I think Avalanche fans would start believing. And if it was one of those that they were bounced in the Western Conference Finals, or God forbid in the Stanley Cup, because they haven't lost a Stanley Cup that they've appeared in, that's when questions and you start questioning where they are. But I don't think they've given a full effort since they won the cup.
Yeah, I feel like from an Avalanche standpoint, like they have the mindset of the whole like cup or bust thing. For them, I think that's what they believe. Nathan McKinnon's mindset, Cale Makar's mindset, like those guys, they don't go out there to play just to, give it the old college try and let's see how far we can go. Like, no, they feel like, hey, if they're not going to make excuses for anything, sure, the Avalanche have had injuries. What team doesn't? Right. So they are going to go out and feel like they can win every game, every series. And that's the thing with all sports is, one team gets to win it. One team gets to say like, and all the other teams are dejected. And it happens more that you're dejected, way more than you have those moments of winning a championship. That's why when you win them, it just feels so good because of all the years that came prior of just loss after loss after, you know what I mean? So, but they feel that way. And even when they maybe don't have the best team, they still feel like, we have a good system. We have fantastic players and we can get by teams. So I don't feel like it's, do they feel like this past season in particular that it was a letdown? You talk to them, probably. Yeah, I'm sure they will feel that way. But even, we sit here and we talk about it every day and we can come up with the excuses and say like, well, if they don't say that stuff. They're not going to say that. So, and then you go into next year and, as long as you got those guys that we were talking about, you got a shot. You definitely have a shot.
Yeah, I know that feeling. You outlined it perfectly. Kind of, you have those veteran leaders, those guys, those dogs that have been there and done there, right? And you feel like they still believe that they're able to get it done. So it just puts you in a weird sort of box when you win one, and again, you still know you have the stars capable. It's like anything less than that, even though it is still success, right? Anything less than the cup is like, well, we didn't do it this year, so. It's just a weird, but also a fun spot to be in. That's where every franchise would love to be in. So I was just curious as to how you guys are kind of holding on with everything. And one last, what's the Gabe update? I got to give my listeners a Gabe update here.
It's on track is all that we can really say. On track for when? We don't know. It could, honestly, Jack, it could be the first game of the season. It could be November 1st. It could be December 1st. But it's funny, like they did a press conference after the season was over, and he said, someone asked him, and he was like, well, how long is the season? October to April? Somewhere in between there was his response. Chris McFarland, GM, was a little bit more down to earth, and it sounded like he was expecting him maybe at the end of this calendar year at some point. Kyle, honestly, since the beginning of this injury, Kyle has thought this is going to be it for him. I feel like he's going to at least come back and give it a shot. and then see what happens. But Kyle's of the mind of no.
Man,
This will be year 3. Like, let's be real here. Like, this is year 3 after getting an experimental surgery that has not been done in the NHL to get out there and play NHL minutes on an NHL team. I just don't foresee it happening. And they're still in year 3 talking at this sliding timeline. Like, what are we wait? Like, I feel like we have seen the last of Gabe Landeskog as Blackhawk fans know him.
You know how he got the injury, Jack?
I actually don't know. I know the pain all too well of watching your star deteriorate too early.
Cale Makar's skate clipped his knee.
In a game or in practice?
In a game.
No.
Cale Makar was making a move, got hit. His skate just came up, went right across his knee. He finished the playoffs and won the cup. So he was playing with it, but it was nothing that he could continue to play with. But that's how it happened, was Cale Makar's skate.
That's crazy.
Yep. So I don't know.
Gabe the best.
What's that?
Wishing Gabe the best, man.
Yeah, he's going to be on the Amazon show. We're behind the scenes stuff, so you'll get some behind the scenes insight as to his recovery. But yeah, he's just a great guy.
Don't come over here trying to poach him for a head coach either. Quit coming over here trying to steal Avalanche now. Please stop.
Finally, Edmonton Oilers come to you guys. Say Connor McDavid for Bedard, 1-for-1. You do it?
No.
Oh.
I'll take the 18-year-old.
See, the age is the factor, right?
Young 18-year-old.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I get that part of it. Yeah. So
both have the same amount of Stanley Cups.
It's 11 years. You're giving me 11 years of runway.
I know. Crazy. And last year, I remember you guys started, was it 6 games on the road?
Oh, yeah.
And I think, and
Boston,
this year,
Montreal.
And this year is 4.
Guys, I discussed this is funny. You guys are hitting all the topics I literally talked about today. Guys, this is the easiest road trip they've had since I've been doing the show.
Let me see. Okay, Utah, and then a back-to-back, Winnipeg and Edmonton,
and then Calgary.
And then in Calgary.
Yeah.
You think that's easy?
It's easier than what it's been.
Okay, I got you.
Dude, opening in Colorado the last 2 years has been a nightmare, man.
Yeah.
I literally just 5-0, 5-1. It's like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
Get ramped by the Avs to start the year again. So literally, it was just a win because I didn't see in Colorado opening night.
Yeah. We joked about it because it was nice opening up again, not because you guys are struggling. I don't want to go that route. Just because it's a division of rival. You open up the season against them. This year, Columbus. That's their home opener is Columbus. Like, oh, okay.
All right.
But Jack Johnson's coming back because he signed with them. So
don't walk.
You guys are gonna poach Jack Johnson from that team somehow, some way at this year's deadline. He was born to be an Avs 7th defenseman.
Probably right. Oh man. All right. Let's wrap this thing up here. So Jack, throw out where people can follow you in the show.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it may be. You can also go and check out Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And if you want to follow my personal account on social, you can find me at Jack Bushman2 on X.
But you changed your profile picture recently.
Got to do it to Scotty Chef, man.
Why?
I'm in the golf scene now, guys. I don't know if you know. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be credentialed to 6 tournaments or so this year. So nice. I'm big in the golf game, and literally waking up that morning to Scotty Scheffler being arrested was hilarious. The last thing I would have ever expected in the entire world. Because if you know about him, he is a man of God, the nicest guy in the entire world. And I'm watching videos of him apparently restraining arrest. And I'm like, what is happening?
Crazy.
So, I don't know how long they'll stay as the pro pick, but it was worthy for the time being.
When I saw it, I'm like, this isn't Jack. Where'd Jack go?
Jack looks good in that orange jumpsuit.
Oh man, that's great. All right, man. Well, we'll do this again at some point during the season, I am sure. So, but thank you for doing it now. And thank you everybody out there for listening, tuning in, and making it your first listen of the day. Always appreciated. For Jack Bushman from Locked On Blackhawks, I'm Chris Micieli with Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan from Locked On Avalanche. Have a good week.